were you born in?
1957.
Where did you grow up during your childhood years?
Mostly in Southern California, until I was about 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And yeah, I grew up till I was about 10 years old in the high desert in Southern California. It was Moreno Valley. It used to be Sunnymead, so high desert.
And then about how
Kind of near
far was
Riverside, California.
how far was that from Los Angeles?
About an hour.
About an hour. Okay, and then from
hour drive, maybe 45 miles or something.
Oh, okay. And then when you were growing up,
and then
can you describe what your
when I
childhood
was 10,
friends?
we moved up here. Yeah. Now I'm about 500 miles north. We moved up here when I was 10. But in Southern California, I had different friends,
Mm-hmm.
in school.
Mm-hmm.
One maybe black,
Mm-hmm.
and then mostly white, right?
Mm-hmm. So most of your friends were just regular white Americans, and then maybe one black American.
Yeah.
What about any Latin American or Mexican or anyone else of any color when you were growing up?
Yeah, one Mexican. Yeah, he lived next door. So yeah, because this is in the '60s,
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
early '60s. So
and
a lot of
then
social unrest. So.
The makeup was that you guys hung out with were boys and girls, or mostly boys?
Yeah, mostly boys and a few girls next door.
When you guys were growing up, what types of childhood games did you play amongst the kids in the neighborhood?
Some baseball and foursquare, stuff like that, tetherball. So,
and then as you think back to your like your earliest memory, do you have any early memories of where someone pointed out to you that there's a major difference, or that there's this perceived difference between being a black person or a person of color and then being a white person? Do you have what are your earliest memories?
Like James, he was black. He said, after school, let's hang out, right? Let's go. I said, let's go to your house. And he's like, oh no, his parents aren't going to allow any white people, come over there, right?
Really?
And he said, let's go to your house. And I said, no, my parents don't like any black people over here, right? So we hang out back in the field, way out in the field somewhere, because his parents didn't like me and my parents didn't like him.
Right. And you guys were still friends and still hung out in the neighborhood. Yeah.
Yeah, still friends. Sometimes we fought, sometimes we're friends.
So, yeah. Uh-huh.
Oh yeah. Most definitely. I mean, my mom was from Arkansas, so we'd go down there in the winter and the summer for vacation. And they had segregated bathrooms and segregated drinking fountains. Mm-hmm. So the one on the right said colored drinking fountain. The one on the left was white drinking fountain. Well, I was like maybe 5 years old. I don't want to drink white water. I want some of that colored water. It sounded like Kool-Aid, So I was like, this sounds much better, right? So I started drinking out of that. And my mom about slapped me. She goes, what are you doing? You don't drink out of that.
Wow.
So segregation was big in the South in the early '60s. Still.
Now, when you compare, you said Arkansas. When you compare Arkansas to where you grew up, did they have the same kind of signage where you grew up? In your
no, in California, we didn't have the segregation. They kids went to schools, together, and same drinking fountains and bathrooms and everything, But there was still a lot of segregation mentally,
Oh, okay.
In the '60s,
And then when that,
you know what I mean?
Yes.
But just in the mind, I mean, not on the signage.
Right. So, not in the signage, but it was still, prevalent.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
When you think about when you were drinking out of that water fountain, what did you think about it? Like, how did you process it at that young of an age? Did you still, how did you take it in?
Well, I didn't know any better, you know, and I still don't, right? You know what I mean? It's like it's water is water, you know. It's
Yeah.
like, you know, so
Yeah.
it's like they thought maybe they thought there was different germs from black people to white people, you know. And my youngest son, he's black, so he's 25 now. I mean, we drink out of the same glasses. The germs are
Yeah.
the same, you know. So I
Yeah.
mean, but I think back then they had a different mentality, and probably maybe they still do in the South. I don't know. So, so
Yeah. And then as you begin to get older, did you still continue to see more situations and where people were making it still a big difference as you got older? Like let's say you got to elementary school, then high school, and then finally got out into the work world. Did you see it consistently, or you would just see it sporadically here and there, where people?
well, when I moved to Napa, it was basically just a white town, so you didn't. And the next town was Vallejo, so Vallejo and Napa were kind of like they don't come over here, we don't go over there, you know, right? You know, kind of a deal,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's more the thing is it's more environment. I mean, my son grew up here in Napa Valley. He went to private schools since he got scholarship age 2, you
Uh-huh.
know,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
and he's 25. He's never committed any crime. He's never smoked. He never drank. He's never done any drugs. He's
Right. Right.
never done anything wrong. He's like a perfect angel, right? I mean, he
Mm-hmm.
didn't grow up in the ghetto. You know, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's environment is what it is. You know, doesn't matter
Mm-hmm.
about the color of your skin. And he's never done anything wrong. Me, when I was 13, I was a drug dealer. I was selling weed and cocaine. I was 13 years old. You know,
No
I mean,
way.
in the most elite neighborhoods, but still,
Right, right,
you
right,
know,
right. Mm-hmm.
there was no danger.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
but him, he has never. My children, and I have children from all nations. You know,
Right.
Irish, German, Black, African American. They've they're all the same. They've never. They're just real innocent. You know,
Wow. That's amazing.
and they're all just real. I mean, I was really blessed to have kids that
Right.
never did anything wrong ever.
Yeah.
You know, it's like incredible. One of them's 38. He turned 38 yesterday. Never done anything wrong. That's just
Wow. And like you said, I
amazing.
guess environment does play a big part, you know.
I think so. You
The
know,
environment plays a big part.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I believe because if I wasn't a single parent, he was raised with his mother in South Central California, down south,
Mm-hmm.
in the ghetto. He could have been a crip, you know, or a
Right.
gangbanger or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, falling right into that,
Mm-hmm.
trap.
Mm-hmm.
So, but being a
So
single
just
parent, I raised him.
right. And then you guys were in Napa Valley and
Yes.
mostly what would you say during the time that you guys were, you were raising your kids? That was probably what, the 70s and 80s?
My kids.
Yeah, when you were raising
Um,
your kids.
yeah, I was like a late bloomer. I didn't have any kids till 1982, and little
Okay.
Bobby was born 1995. You know,
Okay. Hmm.
so so he's the youngest,
Hmm.
and yeah, little Bobby.
As they were growing up, did they ever come up to you and say, "Hey, uh, why are people reacting this way?" Or did they never really face?
They
It just
never
never
they
came
never
up.
really they never really knew, but within the last few years, I've been telling my son, if you get pulled over, you keep your hands on the steering
Yeah.
wheel. You
Hmm.
don't reach for your wallet because they will shoot you. You know, because you look like Obama. You know,
Hmm.
you're in the mix. You know,
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
keep your hands on the
Hmm.
steering. And I don't have to tell my white kids that. You know, of course.
Right. Yeah.
Now, unless they have long hair. Like I had long hair, I just cut it off. And when I have long hair, I get pulled over all the time. I get beat up. They think I'm a drug dealer, and I'm clean and sober. You know, I have no vices at all. But because of my long hair, I will get pulled over about 5 times a year. You know, and now I don't
Wow.
get pulled over anymore. And sometimes I get beaten or searched, and and because they just think you're a drug dealer. It's just
Right, right, right,
profiling.
right.
Yeah.
hmm
So
hmm
I mean, this looks like this guy's got weed or something.
Right, 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 right. And when you got into your, your work life as you got older, um, did you have any experiences where something became a black and white issue, or the subject came up and there had to be a discussion about it, or just even as you got into the work world, it just didn't really come up because of, you're in California and a lot of people have experienced people from different backgrounds.
I did have a lot of trouble in St. Thomas in the Caribbean. I lived there off and on for 30 years, but just for a year and a half at a time, you know,
hmm
3 different stints. But I would live in the worst ghettos down there because the rent was cheap. So I always had trouble getting in and out of my neighborhood because no white people were allowed. So I would
Wow.
get robbed or beaten, or somebody would pull a gun or something. But again, it's environment. I mean, these are tourists that have come down there. There's a lot of resentment because of the slave trade brought them to the Caribbean. There's
Right, right.
poverty, there's no education, there's crack cocaine epidemic starting up. There's so many factors involved. Poverty and so uh, uh, and tourists coming in with all kinds of money. So
Right, 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 right.
so there was a lot of resentment, and I can understand. That it was environment. So yeah, I had a lot of trouble in that neighborhood.
hmm
And I've been back for 4.5 years now, this last stint
Right,
that I
right.
did. But I'd
hmm
have machine gun fire outside my window, like AK-47s and stuff. And it's like if you took Oakland and compressed it down to about a 2 block area, that's how much crime it was. More crime than LA and New York combined per square foot. You know.
Wow.
But like I say, a lot of factors involved. I mean, there's heat and humidity, so you're hot, you're
hmm
mad, you're angry. So
Right, right, right,
a
right.
lot of factors involved. It wasn't just
hmm
one thing.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, it's a very dangerous neighborhood.
hmm hmm
So,
And
but
then for the last question, as you take into consideration everything, how you grew up, how you look at everything, what's going on with the world currently, right now, today, with politics, coronavirus, COVID-19. But in terms of race and racism, how do you see the future, the near future,
I
and the
don't see. I was telling my son it's more like 1920 than 2020. I mean, the
hmm
same stuff's still going on, right? A
right,
hundred years later, and maybe worse. I mean, and I mean, people think, well, we've got a new president coming in a couple months. That'll change everything. No, the police are going to be just as angry, if not more angry now. They could
right,
shoot a black man for jaywalking. I mean, just because of. I mean, that's not going to stop that because we don't vote for police. Maybe we vote for
right.
sheriff once in a while,
hmm
but
hmm
they're not politicians. So I don't think things are going to change. They might get worse with new
right.
president. And
hmm
and 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 people think, oh, 2021, the coronavirus is over. No, this could. I was saying like 9 months ago, this could go until 2023. I
right.
mean,
Yes.
I
Yeah.
was saying right away, this is
mm,
not going to be over. They say, oh, just a couple more weeks, just a couple more weeks. No, a couple more years at least.
right.
Is
Yeah.
what
No.
I was thinking.
hmm
It's like as soon as like it doesn't know New Year's. COVID-19 doesn't know. So they think
right.
January comes, the year's over, everything's fine. No, I don't think
hmm
so.
hmm
So I,
hmm
I, I don't see it, unfortunately, and I always have a positive attitude and think positive and look towards the future, as great things. But I don't see, unfortunately, I don't see it getting real much, very much. I don't see it getting any better within the next, say, 6 months.
right. hmm hmm
Maybe give it 9 months or a year. Maybe
hmm
things will get better with all this animosity from the police,
hmm
towards different minorities, maybe with the COVID,
Right.
and the political thing. Maybe people will start to, instead of being so polarized, maybe they'll stop hating each other. The two different, the Republicans and the Democrats stop hating each other. You know,
Right.
so
Right.
I mean, the intolerance is incredible. I mean, everybody's saying how tolerant they are, but it's not happening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so and those are my thoughts anyway on the
Yeah. No.
future.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the other people that I've been interviewing, everyone, there's this common thread that everyone says a lot of this is still the same as it was 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that's the shocking part.
Right.
We've the
Right.
years have changed, but those attitudes and that animosity is
Right. Right.
it's actually, in some instances, it's a little bit worse now than than a few years ago, and then when you go back
Right.
many years ago, it's almost the same, where people are
Yeah.
just
Uh,
against each other
Even
for.
100 years ago,
Mhm.
you have to be a celebrity for them not to jack you up. Some celebrity, I forget who it was, a black guy. He was in L.A. He was visiting, and the police just pulled him to the ground, right? And he goes, "Why are you pulling me down? Because you have a gray sweatsuit on, and you're a black man. That's who we're looking for." And he said, "Google this name right now." And he was from Saturday Night Live,
No.
and they Googled the name, and they go, "We're sorry, sir, we let you go." And it's a terrible injustice. And just getting
Hmm.
worse is
Hmm.
ridiculous.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
mean, you think people would mature or their brains would evolve a little bit,
Hmm.
maybe, you know, and maybe they would read a book or get some knowledge,
Hmm.
or something.
Yeah. How I explain it to everyone is everyone's from just these
Right,
so different areas. Hey, what if you just ask someone the same question? When you see your answers, next to everyone else's, and when you
right,
just are able to narrow it down, you learn something. Try to talk about racism